suppose we should just jump into what everybody talks about when this book comes up. How I Learned to Fly is not a horror story. Not in the slightest. With the exception of one short, irrelevant scene that feels added to meet some sort of scare quota, this barely feels like a Goosebumps book. This is a more light-hearted children's fantasy adventure, more in line with the works of Bruce Coville or Mary Pope. Now, there's no rule that says every Goosebumps book has to be a scary story. Not every episode of The Twilight Zone is a scary story. But Twilight Zone didn't wait until their 50-second entry to communicate that. Our protagonist today is Jack Johnson. No, not that one. Jack likes to draw, and has a crush on a girl in his class named Mia. However, he also has a thorn in his side. The kid who lives across the street, Wilson Schlam, is always competing against Jack in everything and always winning, showing him up in every possible way. Jack gets a new cool bike, suddenly Wilson shows up with an even cooler new bike. Jack makes a nifty superhero drawing, Wilson shows up immediately afterwards with a drawing of a group of superheroes. You think it might just be a coincidence at first that Jack is making connections that aren't there, but no! Every walk home has to be a race. Every test score has to be compared. This is legit. Wilson has to one-up Jack at every opportunity. This showing off from Wilson comes to a head at Mia's birthday party, which both boys are invited to. First, Wilson shows up making balloon animals out of what seem to be normal party balloons, not the long, thin ones for balloon animals. The kids break out a game of Twister, and not only does Wilson do it better than Jack, it turns out Wilson's dog, who's of course stronger, faster, and better trained than Jack's dog, has been taught how to use the Twister spinner. And then, when hot dogs are served, I lifted up my hot dog. I opened my mouth to take a bite. Whoa, wait a minute. Wilson pushed my hand away from my mouth. You call that a hot dog? He held his hot dog next to mine. He had a foot-long hot dog, twice as big as my regular one. He threw back his head and howled. Then he gulped down his hot dog in 2 bites. He grinned that big, horrible Wilson grin. He was driving me crazy. First off, weird to have a dick measuring metaphor in a children's book. Second, what's implied here is that Wilson brought his own foot-long hot dog to Mia's party? Did he make Mia's parents cook it? Or did he bring it pre-cooked and now it's all cold? It's a heck of a hoop to jump through to try and embarrass Jack, who is presumably eating the same size hot dogs as everyone else in this room. Seriously, what's wrong with Wilson? Well then, it's presents time. Jack gives Mia the new album from her favorite band. Hey, great gift, very considerate of her interests, gold star, Jack. But of course, Wilson shows Jack up by giving Mia 2 front row tickets to her favorite band in concert. Jack snaps, throws a pretty realistic for this kind of book tantrum, and storms out of Mia's house, running as fast as he can. You know, I feel for him. Wilson is genuinely out to get him. There's a lot of intense, confusing emotion, and all Jack can think to do is run as fast as he can, just pure adrenaline as he bolts down the street. David Bowie's Modern Love playing. It's a classic moment of French cinema. Oh, by the way, this book takes place in Malibu, California, a coastal city near Los Angeles. You can tell because it has the Golden Gate Bridge on the cover, that bridge that's famously in Malibu. It's rare for a Goosebumps book to take place west of the Mississippi. Like Stephen King, R.L. Stine doesn't like to go too far out of his backyard, and only does so for plot reasons. He needed some place with hot summers for his Abominable Snowman book, out to Southern California. This book eventually deals with fame and show business, but having it take place in Hollywood would probably be too obvious, so let's go 45 minutes west instead. Anyway, I bring it up now because Jack runs all the way to the beach, with a bunch of beach houses for rich people lined up. One of them is known to be long abandoned, and wanting to get away from the kids chasing him, Mia and Jack's friends are genuinely concerned and are trying to track him down. Jack slips into the empty house. Getting into a sea-soaked basement, Jack finds a strange antique book titled Flying Lessons, with detailed illustrations that show the ways in which a human can fly. Before Jack can get into it, a bunch of rats show up and chase him off. This is that tacked on mandatory spooky scene I was telling you about. It doesn't amount to anything. Jack gets home and hides the book away in an old torn up mattress in the garage. The next day, Jack's parents leave for Anaheim. Jack's father is a small-time talent agent, representing mostly quirky novelty acts that you see as a joke contestant on The Gong Show. Last night, a real nut auditioned for Dad. She played a Beethoven symphony by banging on her head. After 2 notes, she knocked herself out, and Dad had to take her to the hospital. Anyway, the parents leave to check out a potential new act, leaving Jack home alone. He breaks out the flying lessons book and becomes convinced pretty quickly that it's legit. It has the history of human flight, exercises you could do to prep for flying, and finally a special formula that you can make at home, which uses mostly real ingredients like yeast and soda water. I actually considered going all binging with Babish and making the flying formula for your entertainment, but the recipe calls for 10 whole egg yolks. There's no cooking involved here. You're supposed to eat this stuff raw, and I am not risking salmonella for a stupid Goosebumps video. This can't be responsible, right? Having such an easy recipe for kids to replicate that has 10 raw eggs in it? Like, that's a lawsuit waiting to happen. There is one magic ingredient, however, a powder from a packet hidden inside the book. Jack mixes it all together, but before he can try it himself, his tiny dog Morty jumps onto the counter and downs half of it. And lo and behold, Morty starts to fly. Straight up, with no self-control, right into the sky. In a panic, Jack eats the rest of the stuff, and after a few false starts, begins to fly as well. I swerved to the right. Hey, not bad. I pointed to my left, and flew to the left. This was great. I pointed my arm down. Whoa, I started to dive. I brought my arms up quickly and soared straight ahead. If I held my feet together, I picked up speed. And when I separated them slightly, I slowed down. Awesome! I sailed through the sky. I floated, glided, drifted, soared. I even flew on my back. I let the breeze gently lift me up. Then I lowered my arm and swooped down, then up again. I gazed at the hills below, at the houses that nestled in them. The houses seemed to dot the hills in a perfect pattern, right down to the beachfront. It's an exhilarating moment of childhood fantasy, limitless flight with no physical drawbacks. And better yet, something Wilson can't possibly one-up him with. After saving Morty and giving the dog a weighted collar to keep him on the ground, Jack plans to show off his new flying abilities in front of Mia and Wilson. Jack challenges Wilson to a race, to the flagpole and back. The race starts, Jack kicks off the ground and starts flying. He looks back to catch Wilson's shocked expression, only to find Wilson flying right up to him. What happened was that Wilson saw Jack flying around that first time, so he snuck into Jack's house, found the book in the mattress, made the raw egg formula, returned the book, and can now fly himself. As Wilson pulls ahead and wins the race, Jack just breaks. He developed frickin' superpowers, and Wilson still does better than him. The only consolation to all of this is that he still has the book, and he would score points with Mia if he taught her how to fly. But when they get back to Jack's garage, they find it empty. Dad finally cleaned it out, throwing away the old mattress and accidentally throwing away the flying lessons book along with it. It seems that Jack and Wilson will be the only 2 flying humans in the whole world. Wilson pressures Jack into having a race in front of the entire school, which of course Wilson wins, and the 2 flying boys are now public knowledge, which makes them both pretty popular. Yes, Wilson is better, but when you're the second fastest flying boy in the entire world, people still want to hang out with you too, so it's not all bad, right? Hey, we get to be famous! Hooray! Oh, and also, I was not expecting this from a Goosebumps book, but the military show up. One of the men moved toward me. If you really can fly, think of how useful you can be to our government, perhaps as a secret weapon against our enemies. I swallowed hard. The woman in the khaki pants stuck out her hand. Come with us, Jack. She shot a nervous glance at the others. Nothing bad will happen to you. Huh, we're really going there. A strange moment of, Yeah, that's probably how this would play out in the real world. Jack runs away from the military guys for now, but his life quickly gets out of hand. Jack's dad is now seeing his own son as their new meal ticket, and he schedules him to perform at car dealerships and such. Jack's dad sucks, both in how he's willing to exploit his own child, and because he's very bad at exploiting his own child. Before Jack can do a proper gas station appearance, Wilson already has his own TV show. And Dad also sells out his son to the military, forcing him to undergo endless tests for hours every day. It sucks. Jack can't see any of his friends, he can't really go to school. Being the center of attention is exhausting. Being famous sucks. Arms reached out to touch me. Hands grabbed at my sleeves, grabbed at my cape, grabbed frantically, pulled me toward them. I struggled to walk. I pulled free of the grasping hands. The policemen turned to hold the crowd back, but people surged forward in a heavy wave. They broke through the policeman's barrier, pressed against me, started to crush me. I was drowning in hands and legs and talking faces. Jack wants out. Eventually, a flying race is arranged for $1 million prize between Jack and Wilson. The crowds are there, the press is there, even the military guys are there to see how it goes. The two kids take their mark, the race begins, Jack leaps and falls right back down to the ground. He can't fly anymore. Or rather, that's what he wants everyone to think. Jack pretends to lose his flying ability, and immediately everyone leaves him alone. With Wilson being the only known flying person in the world, all the press, all the fame, all the pressure, and yes, all the military focus on him, keeping Wilson too busy for a normal life. And Jack goes back to being a normal kid, hanging out with Mia without Wilson hanging over his shoulder, only now, in the middle of the night, Jack will sneak out and fly over the Los Angeles cityscape, free as a bird. A rare 100% happy ending for a Goosebumps book. How I Learned to Fly really is an anomaly for the series. It'll always stand out as the time Goosebumps didn't bother making a scary story. But is it good? It's okay. It's fine. It's alright. I don't think I liked it that much. First, I think the pacing is really off. Or rather, it's off depending on what you want to try and accomplish here. If you're trying to make a book about how being famous actually sucks, you can't be a normal kid, people demand your attention, it's exhausting, etc., then you probably want to introduce that idea a lot earlier than the final 20 pages of the book. When Jack and Wilson finally fly publicly, we're already 100 pages into a 120-pager. So we just don't have the time to soak in these ideas before the book is over. Moreover, it's not a lesson Jack needs to learn. He never expresses a desire to be famous. Fame just happens to him. It sucks and he opts out. Here's a story. A boy is standing outside. It starts raining. The boy is all, "Oh, I'm getting wet." And so he gets out of the rain. Literature! Jack isn't motivated by fame, he's motivated by impressing Mia, which is its own can of worms. Mia isn't a character, she's an object to be desired. She has no actualization in the story. The plot even goes out of its way to deny her flying powers, because that would get in the way of Jack and Wilson competing to get her interest. I suppose the logic here is you can't impress a girl with your cool bike if she already has the same bike. You could replace Mia with a lamp, or a dog, or Nicolas Cage, and nothing would really change. Mia is a prize to be won, not a character. Jack gets Mia in the end. Well, get in whatever way a 12-year-old boy gets a 12-year-old girl, but not because he grew as a character or really did anything worthwhile. You'd expect something like Jack trying to get famous to impress Mia, he gets caught up in being famous, he becomes a jerk, realizes that fame has made him a jerk because Mia doesn't like jerks, and now Jack rejects fame. But again, Jack never wanted fame. He just wanted Wilson to leave him alone. Then Wilson leaves him alone, and so Jack gets Mia. This sucks. This really sucks. Now, it's not all negative. It's really not that bad. The book does a great job of presenting flight, detailing the thrill of it. Flight is pure power fantasy, and the book revels in that power fantasy. Moreover, while I think most of the fame is bad moral stuff doesn't work, the book demonstrates how making something you love into your job can suck all the joy out of it, which is just as relevant today. Take it from me, I pay my rent making YouTube videos. It can be really crushing. So, for the rewrite, what would I change? First off, I would not tell children that eating 10 raw eggs will make them fly. Second, I would have Jack pursuing fame from the very beginning. Give him show business parents who take him to auditions, maybe even have him be in a commercial or two. It'll be in this arena that he and Wilson are rivals. They're constantly showing up in the same spaces because this is Hollywood and my kid is gonna be famous, damn it. Having Jack desire fame at the beginning, or even, at all, will make his rejection of fame land so much better. Third, nobody gets Mia. Mia is a normie in the equation and not actually that impressed with either of Jack or Wilson's behavior. Jack denies her flight not because the book is lost, but because he thinks that will make him less special, dilute what makes him famous. She isn't denied by plot, but by Jack's selfishness. So when Jack finally realizes what fame is doing to him and he rejects it, there has to be a sacrifice. Jack can never fly again. Fame has ruined that pure thing for him. Mia, meanwhile, has taken it upon herself to steal the book and learn flying herself, not to obtain fame, but just to fly. The final scene in the book being Jack, wiser but kinda defeated, looking out the window and watching Mia literally fly out of his life. Yes, it turns a happy ending into a sad ending, but it's much more thematically cohesive, gives Mia some actualization, and it can still stand out as that Goosebumps book that isn't a horror story. I didn't dislike this book so much as it brought out a reaction of, okay, so? And I guess we'll just leave it at that. I give How I Learned to Fly a 6.5 out of 10. What? If it's not going to try being a Goosebumps book, I'm not going to rate it like a Goosebumps book.